In this video, we're going to do something slightly different. And instead of talking about the current news, we're going to address common Zionist arguments and how to debunk them. This might be a series or this might be a one-off, but this is something that I'm rather passionate about. So it's very likely that I'll be doing more videos on this. Now, Zionism is not difficult to debunk. It's not difficult to break down and see the irrationality of. Because by its very nature, Zionism is based on the presupposition that Jews are superior to other ethnicities. And this is the reason why Zionists do not have a problem with the state of Israel, which is basically the state of the Jews, implanting itself and expelling the indigenous people in the process of establishing the state. And I'm talking about mainstream Zionism right now, because there are elements in the past where there was a form of Zionism which was about establishing a binational single state with power shared between Jews and Arabs. But that time is long gone now. This may be the Zionism that Noam Chomsky's family may have followed, the sort of Zionists that started the kibbutz and had socialist leanings. But this Zionism, not only, was it something that was one of the strands of Zionism, it lost the argument, and it was not actually, it wasn't totally adhered to, and people just, kind of moved on to another, or the mainstream form of Zionism, which is about maximalist aims of essentially establishing the state of Israel at any costs in most cases. Now, this means that Zionism, by its very nature, is anti-justice, because justice means that you believe in some form of equality between peoples, or your form of justice is totally different and at odds with the consensus of justice. This is why Israel is constantly breaking UN security resolutions, because it does not believe in the authority of other nations to act as the moral arbiter for their own actions. They believe in a form of ethno-supremacy. Now, yes, there are kind of historical historical background to kind of justify, or rather historical context in which people would come to this conclusion, especially if they are on the far right-wing Jews. But there's no actual rational argument. It's more a fear-based argument of, we must secure ourselves at any cost. And this also, this argument can also be broken down because, of course, European anti-Semitism is not the same as, let's say, these kind of the hostilities that Palestinians have against Israelis, because, of course, Palestinians are indigenous people. It's like, it's like the home being hostile to invaders, and those invaders stealing the home and killing off, the home participants or tenants. Obviously, hostilities is natural, normal, it's a reaction. But, the historical, age-old, European anti-Semitism is very much ingrained in the culture and the development of European capitalism even. Just by mere virtue of the fact that only Christians, or rather only Jews, could practice usury for the longest time. This is why a vast majority of those who are moneylenders could actually, were Jews. And that led to, kind of like a sense of hostilities towards these, and a kind of conspiracy theories based on these moneylenders taking up too much power. That is the European anti-Semitism and the basis for it. Although there's a lot more, with how Jews killed Christ, and there's There's more of there's other kind of cultural factors at play. But you can't retrofit the anti-Semitism of Europe and force it into the Middle East. It's completely different context, and hostilities will arise based on different factors. Furthermore, every minority group in the world has suffered prejudice to some degree. So the argument that this is a special group that has suffered a special type of hostility, a special type of discrimination, it only makes sense if you ignore the reality of how people form hostilities, the context of hostilities, the history of hostility. People have committed genocide against other groups. Armenians, people of Congo were killed by King Leopold II. But let's get back to the focus of this video. I'm going to address some of the main arguments Zionists put forward, and we're going to debunk them concisely. And I'll go through as many as I can in this video. I've only got about 16 minutes for the total of this video, but I will go through what can conjure up. So a common argument is that people bring up October 7th. October 7th. It's like a thought-terminating cliche. So thought-terminating cliche is when you use a word to just kind of destroy any kind of thought process and any argument against it. It's a stopgap. So the reason why we focus on October 7th and not, let's say, December 31st, 1947, which is the start of the Nakba, which killed 15 to 25,000 Palestinians, is because October 7th centers the experience of one people, and not even just experience, the rhetoric of one people, of a right-wing rhetoric of one people, and at the exclusion of the experience of Palestinians. The experience of Palestinians is merely a footnote. So the reason why we mention October 7th and not December 31st is because Palestinians are not human beings. The reason why we mention October 7th, 2023, and let's say not July the 8th, with the start of the Operation Cast Lead, which killed 1,400 Palestinians and 300 children. Both of these operations so far, Nakba, Operation Cast Lead, killed more Palestinian children, killed more Palestinian innocent people than any innocent Israelis. The reason why we center the experience of this group and not acknowledge the suffering of Palestinians, because this is a racist argument if you were to ignore the suffering of the Palestinians. And then you take into consideration that October 7th was not born in a vacuum. It was kind of like a consequence of multiple factors. Even though you can condemn the actions of October 7th, and I can condemn the kind of the methods used. That being said, when we look at the power dynamics, when we look at what international law, an occupying force does not have the right to defend itself. An occupying force does not have the right to defend itself. And the occupied do have the right to defend themselves. Now, the issue of October 7th is open and shut in terms of, because Palestinians don't matter, this reason why we mention that date, always and forever. And if October 7th was horrible, then what happened to the Palestinians since then was 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times worse. So you can't make the moral argument that October 7th is bad, because you're doing the same exact times 100 on the Palestinians. So save me the moral arguments for October 7th being bad if you're not going to consider the fact that the worst upon worst is happening to Palestinians. So another argument is that it was already a Jewish country and it was Jewish land to begin with. Actually, when the Balfour Declaration was made in 1917, the vast majority of people, 90% of the people, were Arab Christians and Muslims. that is not an argument that you can rationally use. If you're going to make an argument that 3,500 years ago it was Jewish land, it does not make any sense because, first of all, genealogically, I want to see the DNA. I want to see the data because it's conclusive. The DNA evidence suggests that Palestinians have a connection to the Canaanites that were there prior to the Jewish kingdoms 3,500 years ago. So this blood and soil argument is completely debunked just by looking at the DNA evidence. And then you also identify that this blood and soil argument of kicking people off the land because they're simply not DNA, their DNA is not connected to land, not only does it not make sense because, of course, the fact that, Jews have a higher incidence of skin, cancer, and therefore they're not clearly showing that they're not indigenous to the Middle East. But also, this argument is used by the Nazis to kick Jews off the land because it was, Deutschland, the fatherland, was the land of the Aryans, and the Jews do not deserve to live on there. So is that the argument that you're using? Is that the morals that you're using, ethics that you're using to justify taking another person's land? You have to think twice about that one. So these are two very common arguments used. October 7th, that the land was already there, already theirs. But that is debunked by the evidence quite succinctly. Another very strong argument, or rather an argument that is a lot of weight is put into, is that Israelis were the peaceful ones and the Arabs attacked them, and that's why they had to take the land. Actually, there's no evidence to suggest that Israel, the Zionists, had any intention to share the land. In fact, when the Balfour Declaration was made in 1917, where the land was promised to Jewish people, 2 years later, the World Zionist Organization mapped out the land of Israel to become, and it took the entire land of Palestine, parts of Jordan, Egypt, Syria, Lebanon. So how can you say that it was, it's by mere coincidence that you eventually took that land? Anyway, furthermore, the Irgun militia, founded in the 1930s, had a map of historical Palestine and also the entirety of Jordan. How can you therefore say that it wasn't the intention to take over the land? And then the final nail on a cross, on a coffin, happened years before that. In 1895, Theodor Herzl, the founder of political Zionism, literally said he wanted to transfer the indigenous people away from the land of Palestine so that they can take over the land for their Zionist project. So, this land was already marked for, they fought for it, and they killed for it. And it was not an accident that the land was taken. It was never an intention to acknowledge the dignity, the self-determination of the people living in the land. In fact, Zeev Jabotinsky, another prominent Zionist leader, he talked constantly about how, as long as there is the chance of resisting against invaders, people will do that. And they're talking about how they're taking the land from the Arabs very openly. And so that's another very common argument, that it was the intransigence, the belligerent violence of Arabs that led to Jews taking over the land. But it was already something designed. It was already by design that this project manifested in the colonialism of Palestine. You wouldn't have the Jewish Colonialism Association to begin with if there was no intention to colonize the land. And let's not forget that the racism against Palestinians was already there in the 1920s. Moshe Smolansky said that Palestinians are a semi-savage people. They never considered Palestinians as equal beings. And this was long before the Holocaust. Another justification used is that you need a safe refuge for Jewish people. Well, that's thrown out the window, because Israel has not been any more safer than, let's say, New York, parts of Europe, where you have a large proportion of Jewish people. In fact, it's been quite unsafe. People escape Israel when there's a war. Netanyahu literally, in the war against Iran, he literally escaped to Greece. So these people talk a big game. They talk like they're courageous, but actually they want a safe space, a second home. And they're not really, they don't have that much of an attachment to Israel. They just want it to be the expression of their racial supremacy, and the domination of Palestinians is merely a symptom of that. And we need to acknowledge this. We need to acknowledge whether we want to live in a society where we all have a shared sense of humanity, or we have these different tribes fighting each other for their own self-interest. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, comment, and subscribe. That'd be very much appreciated. Thank you.